Welcome to a fun clip from the monthly Classic Game Room podcast, CGR 2085, broadcasting from the year 2085. This month I talked with Johnny Millennium, happy console gamer, one of the few people I could probably spend all day speaking about G.I. Joe issue 21 with. All day. Snake Eyes is the biggest badass in the universe, and this was a lot of fun, revisiting the 80s with happy console gamer who's very happy and super cool. So check out the clip, and the full 75-minute podcast is over at the Classic Game Room Patreon. I do one of these every month. So thank you again, Johnny Millennium. It was great talking to you, and I look forward to doing it again soon. G.I. Joe 21. Not a word of dialogue, but a whole lot of Snake Eyes and Scarlet. That's right before Cobra Commander gets his ass handed to him. Again! He's very incompetent. Testing, okay. Setting microphone level. Too loud, too hot, too cold. Too much. There, alright. Welcome to CGR 2085, the Classic Game Room podcast. I'm adjusting my audio levels here because it's an exciting podcast. Today, coming to you from the future, where I am speaking with Johnny Millennium of Happy Console Gamer, the Happy Console Gamer alternative to angry reviews. He brings happy reviews.
I bring happy reviews.
But we're not going to be that happy this podcast because we're going to spend 2 hours making fun of GameSack.
Oh, I like the sound of that. Shall we start with Joe or Dave? I'm going to start with Joe because Dave is such a sweetheart, let me say.
We are not going to spend 2 hours making fun of GameSack, but we could.
We have to do is say GameSack, and that's funny enough, isn't it?
3 video game review shows that might actually remember the tail end of the 70s.
Yeah, isn't that scary? We were all born in the 70s, which is amazing.
But we're going to be talking tonight about just stuff. And Johnny and I have gotten to just touch base briefly over some emails, and apparently we're roughly the same age. And we both have very similar interests, and I see that we're both married to brunettes. And,
yes.
and we both love old school video games, comic books, manga, and isn't the new Ghost in the Shell movie the greatest movie ever made? I mean, I was blown away by how well cast it was and how faithful it was to the original manga and the anime. It paid great homage to the terrific anime.
I had anime tears while I watched it. It was everything I was hoping and then some, and it was none of those things. It was just, what a disappointment. My God.
It was...
What were can I ask, what were your thoughts when you were sitting there? Like, let's go back for a second. When did you discover Ghost in the Shell?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. I discovered Shiro Masamune's work. You and I both, I think, probably got into manga roughly around 1990? 91?
Yeah, 1988, 89, yeah.
I was like 1990. I think one of the first manga I got was, I picked up was Appleseed 2.
Oh, yeah, good old Appleseed, yeah.
From, he was titled as Masamune Shiro in those days on the books. And then I really got into, that. I think that was my first experience into manga. And I read Akira, but I think it wasn't as easy to figure out where the beginning was in those days. And you could say, well, shouldn't you start at 1? But you couldn't just like find it that easily, you know. So I read a bunch of Akira, but I ended up really getting into Appleseed, and I had all of Shiro Masamune's stuff. And then I saw Ghost in the Shell came out, and I have my copy sitting right here. I'm holding it up.
Did you ever read Orion, the other work that he did?
I have Orion. Orion's on the shelf over there. Tank Police, Dominion. It was Dominion Tank Police.
That's correct, yeah.
It's been a while since I've read that one. Ryan was really good. You called it Orion. I was calling it
Orion. I got Orion, yeah. Like, you know what's so funny about some pronunciations back then is that back in the 90s, there was no internet, so I couldn't ask anybody, am I pronouncing this right? So let me say, I pronounce everything the way that I think it's pronounced because that's the way I did it in the 90s. And I've been saying it for like 20 years, and nobody corrects me until now. And they're like, you're saying that name completely wrong. I'm like, but that's how I say it.
It's Ninja Gaiden, damn it.
Ninja Gaiden. I know, Ninja Gaiden. Actually, my friends did call it Ninja Gaiden, but So what was your thoughts when you saw the movie version of Ghost in the Shell? I'm talking about the animated movie from '95.
Well, I loved the comic book. I read the comic in about 90, the manga in 94. We just called it comic books back in the day. I read the comic in 94, 95, and I remember just reading it all. I just started reading it in college one night. It must have been like a sophomore. I read the whole damn thing. And I was like, holy shit, this is simply the best comic book I've ever written. I liked it even more than Appleseed, and that says a lot. So I read it a couple times, and I just loved the characters and the depth. And I mean, he was brilliant, and the fact that so much of what he wrote has actually come true.
With a net, and remember, like, we have to take everybody back for a second. Is that when you read Ghost in the Shell back then, they talked about the network, and that's before the internet existed.
Yeah, he wrote it a couple years before we got it here. I mean, I think he wrote it in like 1991. So in the whole and the entire concept of the book is about like cyber hacking. Which is, obviously what the world that we're living in these days. I mean, it's just I was blown away, and then I saw the anime in '95, and that really definitely struck a tone with me as well. And I was really big into Macross Plus at the same time.
Oh, I love Macross Plus. There's another point we got going on there, Macross Plus. Absolutely.
We both love G.I. Joe 21. I think that solidifies it right there. I mean, we've got the same taste.
That's it's so great to talk to somebody who remembers Macross Plus. I got them all on Laserdisc. I imported the Blu-rays from Japan last year. Cost me a pretty penny.
Yeah, I was eyeing those up.
Harmony Gold has just screwed us all over for getting any Macross stuff. So you have to import it if you want it now. And it did have subtitles, which was some of it was dubbed. You have the dub on there.
I actually tweeted Richard Epcar, who does the voice of Gold Go Bowman on that. I'm like, is your voice on the Japanese one? I'm not even consider it unless you're on the Japanese one. I think he said yes, but then I checked on eBay, and there's like two versions of it and two Japanese releases. There's like that really nice looking one, which is hundreds of dollars. And is that the one that you have?
I think that's the one I got. I'll have to pull it off the shelf later on.
It looks nice.
The thing is, they have what's the guy's name? I'm actually drawing a blank on the guy who does Isamu Dyson.
That's Walter White.
Walter White.
That's not his. That's Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, right, Bryan Cranston. But they replaced him in volume 4 of the OVA in the Japanese version.
I think I read that online somewhere. When I forget where I saw that. They're like, oh, did you know that Bryan Cranston did Isamu Dyson? I'm like, no, you got to be kidding. I'm like, I remember his voice. I remember Isamu Dyson's voice being good. Like the English dub
really
being, both lead actors. I mean, Richard Epcar, I'm a big fan of all of his work. He's Bateau in Ghost in the Shell, if you don't know. And, and he also does Ben Dixon in Robotech. And every now and then I'm like...
No, does he do Ben Dixon? I didn't know he did Ben.
Yeah, tweet him and just go, Ben Dixon, ho, 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 ho. He always likes it. He seems like a nice guy. That is
amazing. Hey, I learned something. I didn't know he did that. That's from back in the days of Robotech. That's great.
Yeah, but... we could talk about. I'm already like getting lost in what we're talking about. We're starting to get so deep into this.
I'll keep us steered on. So,
the new movie.
You discovered the manga, and then you watched the anime, and that you enjoyed that as well. I thought it was a little bit slow, but I enjoyed that animated film. Now it's 2017. You get to see the movie with Scarlett Johansson. You walk in, you sit down. What are your thoughts?
All right. Well. I'm going to give one more minute to the 95 anime, which is, I didn't like it as much the first time I saw it because I thought that the Major's voice was poorly cast in the English dub. I just didn't think she had a lot of emotion. And I also thought it was a tad bit slow. But then I'd seen it probably like 10 times since then. And I believe the director of that's Mamoru Oshii, right?
Yeah, some guy did Pat Labor and stuff, I think, isn't it? Yeah,
he did Jinro and some really good stuff. I mean, I ended up just really getting into the art of it. I just thought like his directing and his use of music
at that time, was really
good. Yeah. So I mean, I have a special love for that movie, and I knew when I heard they were making the live action one, I'm like, really? I don't know. There's no way they're gonna do this justice at all. But And I heard they cast Scarlett Johansson. Everyone's like, "Oh, she's white. She can't do it." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, maybe that's I'm kind of agreeing with you on that one. Probably should have been a Japanese actress, but at the same time, let's just give her a chance here. I mean, she's.
I didn't care who was cast. I wouldn't care if it was a Mexican person or I wouldn't care for somebody from India. I don't care as long as they can play the role well. You know what I mean? We can go for something, somebody completely different. Who cares? But
I
it
think
wasn't Scarlett Johansson that was the problem. The problem is the movie.
Yeah, the problem was well beyond her. She was probably just getting really. I believe it was horribly directed. The directing in that movie is terrible. The producing was terrible.
Very amateur movie, wasn't it? Wouldn't you say?
So I had terrible expectations going into it. In fact, my friend and I, we had like 2 beers beforehand, and we're just like, yeah, this is gonna suck. So whatever. We're having we're just out for the night. Let's just have a good time. We were the only people in the theater.
Wow.
And I think maybe 1 or 2 people actually came in after us, and they left early.
Yeah.
So that says something. But we had low expectations, but it even surpassed my bad expectations of how awful it was. I honestly think the new Ghost in the Shell movie is episode 1 quality, and possibly even worse, because episode 1 at least had, and I'm going to bite my tongue on this, but it was at least professional to some degree, because
you're talking about Star Wars episode 1,
yeah,
right?
Like you don't put the John Williams music alone.
And you know what I've always said? The Phantom Menace may be a weak movie, but the music is incredible.
It's one of his best musical scores. I mean,
it really is.
I mean, the rest of it, the acting's terrible. Obviously, Jar Jar is like my least favorite thing ever, but. Yeah, the Ghost in the Shell was a disaster. I mean, they just didn't. It was not tied together well. And I mean, my friend and I were both familiar with the book and the anime, and so we could kind of follow along. But like, we're trying to think, like, man, if you didn't know any of this, like, where would you be in this movie?
Yeah, and that's what I went in saying. I said when I went to see the movie, I left the love of the manga and the anime at the door, and I said, okay, this is its own movie. It needs to do its own thing. And I sat there and watched it, and I'm like, this movie doesn't even have a voice. It's not even saying anything. What's it trying to say? It's trying to be deep, but it's not deep. It's so superficial. I was just so disappointed. I said, if Ridley Scott had done this, he would have added, could you imagine if there would be meaning, there would be depth, and there was none of that. And even the end of the movie, I was like, there was no puppet master merging with the major the same way. I mean, I was just I'm like, what is this? This is all about a woman trapped in a robot's body, it made it seem. And it didn't, that's not what the original is about. The original is about what is really humanity. And there's a lot of deeper things. I didn't think they really got that in this movie.
I don't think they captured any of the characters. I don't think the major was captured well. I think Bateau was horrible.
Bateau was, what did you think of him? I thought he was almost so comic book-ish that it was almost embarrassing. Like he'd be slamming his fist down and getting angry over something that's not really that much to get angry about. It works in the comic book, but it doesn't work in this movie.
And
it's weird.
One of my favorite characters in the series is Togusa, and I don't think they did him justice.
No.
It's sort of like they had a fan of the movie kind of go through some parts of the movie that they liked, and they're like, well, let's put the little part with the garbage truck in there, and then we'll have the part with her running down the alleyway, and then we'll try to do the thing with her spin kicking the guy. But I think part of what really made it suck, in addition to it generally being misguided in every possible way, is that it relied on special effects in an era where we're now so jaded and used to special effects that it wasn't impressive in any way. In fact, it looked amateur. It looked
amateur.
Like it looked like a bad video game.
You know, when they were going through the city, there was a shot of like a little girl, and then a guy in like, what was it, kind of like a doctor's uniform with a mask on, and he's like giving this, it's like a hologram image in the city, and they kept using the same freaking image over and over again in different parts of the city. I'm like, really, guys? You got to recycle that? And yeah, you're right. You go through the city, and you see all these billboards, and it had nothing on the city scenes out of Blade Runner, or even the city scenes out of Avatar. I'll even say the beginning scenes in Avatar in the city were very well done. And this was like amateur hour, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it bombed, and I'm fairly confident there won't be another one.
we are really starting on a high note here, a very happy note, aren't we?
We've dragged Ghost in the Shell the movie through the dirt, but I think part of it is because I also think anybody who takes a risk to remake something is facing an uphill battle, because I mean you're first of all, you're trying to take a popular manga and turn it into a movie. You're trying to take a popular anime and turn it into a live action movie, which never works well. like people have. I mean, it's like trying to remake Star Wars or something. I mean, it's like you're taking a part of someone's childhood, or at least something they liked when they were younger, and watched 1,000 times, and remaking it, and then doing a bad job at it. On top of that, I mean, it really was disappointing. I'm trying to think if there's any. Has there ever been a good anime turned into a live action film? I'm drawing a blank.
Well, there's the Dragon Ball Revolution, which was just unbelievable. No, I'm kidding. That was terrible. There really hasn't been, and that was also the thing that disturbed me the most. I'm like, we can't get this right. It never seems to work. And they're talking about doing Akira. They're talking about doing a Robotech movie.
Yeah, they've been talking about those for years. I'll bet you they don't get done now.
The Robotech movie makes me extremely nervous. It's going to be so terrible.
Has that actually been greenlit? Are they doing that?
I just remember at one time Leonardo DiCaprio was attached to it. I'm like, is this a real thing? And it's like, that's what they were talking about. That's some of the rumors. But Harmony Gold, man. Harmony Gold is now a real estate company. That owns the rights to Macross.
I just don't think Robotech's popular enough anymore to spearhead a big budget film like that. And I think Akira's best left exactly the way it is.
Yes, but we all know how that works. Things that should be left alone. RoboCop. Did they leave that alone? Absolutely not.
I haven't seen that one yet, and I won't, because I know that they'll never. There's no way they could ever recapture the.
Give
genius,
the man a hand.
The genius of the old one. Can you fly, Bobby?
Can you fly, Bobby? I love those lines.
I think I watched it not too long ago. I think my favorite part of the movie ended up being the part where he sticks his finger in the wine and snorts it. I'm like, come on. Like these little touches.
Back in the day, my dad would take me to see all the latest movies back then, like The Terminator. And one day we went to see a little movie called RoboCop. And the rumors in school was that RoboCop was a Japanese movie and that they'd brought it over here. And when you watched it in the theater, there would be subtitles on it. So that was some of the rumor mill back then.
Before the internet.
Before the internet days. But this is so funny. I'll never forget this. We're sitting there watching RoboCop, and I'm loving the movie. But I'm sitting to my dad and said, Dad, like, what is that smell? Like, what's going on? And he's like, and he points in front of us. And no joke, there was a classic, this is like, the 80s, classic bum, hobo character, guy, sitting in front of us with a wine, like a Mickey, sorry, in a bag, drinking it, messed up hair, like the old, what was it, hobo jacket, everything. It was ridiculous. I got to tell you, so there's one part. Do you remember when they're in the chemical plant and the car's driving and the guy's, falls into the chemicals and he comes out and he's like shuffling across the road and he looks and he gets hit by the car and he explodes all of the car?
I can recreate that scene for you if you'd like.
Can you?
And he gets splattered all over the windshield.
So he splatters all over the windshield, and the bum stands up, and out of nowhere, and just goes, "Yeah, RoboCop, yeah!" And it had nothing. RoboCop hadn't done this, and we're just like, "What?" And it was one of those scenes that I've never forgotten my whole life. And it made RoboCop even more memorable of a theater 1980s experience.
Classic Game Room is brought to you by Ethel the Cyborg Ninja, Book 1, and Jesus the Coked Up Chicken #1, Special Edition, now on Amazon. Welcome to the Lord Carnage Club, being shouted from within. A Turbo Volcano! Starting with Andy and Abby Schleiss. Jeff Breyer. Derek Langley. Michael and Ariana Nelson. Benjamin Woodring. Steven Chucknick. Al Stever. Ian Shore. You sure are awesome. Jason Goy. Sergio Matthias Hergert. Chip Sankbale. Busy Signal. Sean Zoltek. Rick DeBarros. Philip Strabenmuller. Jack Stavris. Ohad Kane. And Tiago Pereira dos Santos Silva from Porto, Portugal. Tiago Pereira dos Santos Silva from Porto, Portugal.